All right, guys, we are back with another reaction. Napoleonic Wars Battle of Wagram, 1809. So, last video we saw Napoleon kind of suffer a little bit of a setback. The Austrians did better, and it looks like he's going to come back with a vengeance here. So let's see what happens. Thank you guys for subscribing, commenting. Thank you to Epic History TV, all their sponsors and their Patreons. Really appreciate it. Thank you.
In May 1809, the Austrians had defeated Napoleon's army in the bloody Battle of Aspern. His enemies took heart. After years of French military dominance, it seemed the tide was turning at last. 3 weeks later, Pope Pius VII excommunicated Napoleon for annexing papal land. Another propaganda coup for his enemies. But in the wake of its victory, Austria hesitated, not sure whether to seek peace or continue the war, while Napoleon responded with a hurricane of activity. He summoned reinforcements to join him near Vienna, the Army of Italy under his stepson Eugène de Beauharnais, and 11th Corps under Marshal Marmont, who'd together driven Archduke John's Austrian army out of North Italy, as well as Marshal Bernadotte's Saxon 9th Corps. Napoleon's army grew from 90,000 to a massive 164,000 men and 544 guns, to take on Charles's army of 128,000 and 414 guns. 6 weeks after his first attempt had ended in defeat, Napoleon ordered his army to cross the river once more. This time, his engineers had built solid bridges across the Danube to ensure there was no repeat of the disasters of Aspern. For the French army, Napoleon declared, the Danube no longer exists. The stage was set for the largest battle yet seen in European history.
Really?
If you think our Napoleon series has made you a master of tactics and strategy...
We'll just turn that down while their sponsor runs. I don't want to ever skip their sponsors. Yeah. So it looks like the French under Napoleon, typical speed, decisiveness. And as we've seen in time and time again, the Austrians kind of not really know what to do. So they didn't really make a decision, apparently. And now Napoleon's going to punish them. I'm assuming, anyway. So thank you guys for watching, commenting on the last video, and I appreciate it, man. This channel is not for I'm not doing this for career, but I am doing it for learning, and I appreciate everybody following along and giving me a bunch of information. It's a good job you're not any taller. Napoleon to a staff officer whose helmet was knocked off by a cannonball. Yeah, that is close call, my guy. Close call.
On the evening of the 4th of July, in heavy rain, the French began crossing from the island of Lobau, not towards the devastated villages of Aspern and Essling, but east towards Groß-Enzersdorf, which was soon ablaze from French shells.
Wow.
Archduke Charles had left only a small advance guard to delay the French. By dawn, General Massena's 4th Corps and Oudinot's 2nd Corps were driving those troops back, winning space for the French army to deploy. At 1 p.m, Napoleon was ready to begin his advance across 6 miles of flat cornfields towards the main Austrian position, an escarpment known as the Wagram, 100 meters behind the Russbach stream. As General Lasalle's light cavalry and Massena's 4th Corps swung left to guard the flank, Oudinot's 2nd Corps and Davout's 3rd Corps advanced towards the Wagram. Bernadotte's Saxon Corps and Eugène's Army of Italy filled the center. At 6 p.m, unsure of the enemy's strength, Napoleon ordered a full-scale assault against the Wagram plateau. but his troops met determined Austrian resistance along the line. By dusk, the Saxon 9th Corps had pushed into the village of Deutsch Wagram. The Saxon infantry wore white uniforms, like the Austrians, and as darkness fell, were mistaken for the enemy and fired on by friendly units.
No, no.
The Saxons panicked and fled with heavy losses. Napoleon's attempt at a quick breakthrough had failed. That night, both armies slept in the open, while Charles and Napoleon planned their next moves.
Okay, day 2. Now that would really suck to be, the Saxons and that, obviously if they're both wearing white, I understand might be a little difficult at night or dusk to kind of differentiate between allied and enemy troops. But I mean, looking at it from their perspective, the Saxons' perspective, that would really suck because you're fighting a person ahead of you, right? And then you got people shooting you from behind, essentially, or from the side. And what are you going to do? I mean, you're not just going to stand there.
On the second day, Napoleon planned for Davout's 3rd Corps to lead the attack, rolling up the Austrian flank, while his other corps pinned down the enemy with local attacks. But to the Emperor's fury, he learned that overnight, without orders, Marshal Bernadotte had withdrawn his battered Saxons from Aderklaa, which the Austrians now occupied. Aderklaa was a crucial strongpoint in the center of the battlefield. Napoleon gave orders for its immediate recapture, but the French and Saxon attack failed, with heavy losses. The Austrians had their own problems. Archduke Charles, knowing he faced a superior enemy, had decided his only chance of victory lay in an all-out dawn attack.
Really?
He was relying on his brother, Archduke John, reaching him with 13,000 reinforcements, in time to support the attack on the left. But by dawn, there was still no sign of him. What's more, as 4th Corps began its assault on Grosshofen, on time, 3rd Corps, which had received its orders late, was still getting into position, holding up the entire Austrian right wing. Charles had to tell 4th Corps to abort its unsupported attack until the other corps were ready.
Wow.
With the Austrians paralyzed by delays, at 10 a.m., Davout began his attack. A fierce infantry battle erupted in the village of Markgraf Neusiedl, while in the fields, dragoons and hussars fought a giant whirling cavalry battle, as each side tried to outflank the other. Davout's corps took the village,
Nice.
though they couldn't stop the Austrians withdrawing to a strong new position on the Wagram escarpment. Meanwhile, a serious threat had developed to Napoleon's left flank and rear. Klenau's 6th Corps had driven back the outnumbered French, with some units advancing as far as Essling, dangerously close to Napoleon's vital river crossings. Napoleon urgently needed to reinforce his left flank, but he was also determined to hold back his reserves for a decisive attack. So he ordered Massena's 4th Corps to march across the battlefield and reinforce the left. A huge redeployment like this, right in front of the enemy, was high risk. So Marshal Bessières was ordered to lead a cavalry attack straight against the enemy center. Casualties were high. Even Marshal Bessières had his horse killed under him, to the alarm of his men. But the enemy was kept busy, while 4th Corps completed its redeployment and forced Klenau's corps to fall back.
Any trooper who isn't dead by 30 is a coward, and I don't anticipate exceeding that length of time. General Antoine Lassalle, killed at Wagram, age 33. Wow. That's crazy. What a wild quote that is. But it seems like a strange thing. Napoleon's usually, very, I wouldn't say headstrong, but he usually like lightning attacks and stuff like that. But it's surprising to see him holding back a little bit. We'll see what happens though.
Napoleon now assembled a grand battery of more than 80 cannon in the centre of the battlefield. This was one of Napoleon's trademark tactics, a concentration of artillery to blast the enemy line and pave the way for a decisive French attack. The Grand Battery fired an estimated 15,000 rounds,
What the
setting
heck?
right to the cornfields. Around 1 p.m, Napoleon ordered a general attack. As Davout continued to batter at the enemy flank, 4th Corps would advance on the left, 2nd Corps on the right, while in the centre, General MacDonald would lead forward 8,000 men of the Army of Italy, formed up in a giant three-sided square to secure his flanks.
Wow.
But despite the terrible French cannonade, Austrian 3rd Corps and Grenadiers of the Reserve met the French advance with torrential fire. MacDonald's giant square was cut to pieces, its men mowed down en masse by cannon fire, and the attack stalled.
Wow.
But the Austrian army, battered by relentless French attacks, was near breaking point. Every part of the line was under pressure from the French. Archduke Charles, determined above all to keep his army intact, ordered a retreat. The Austrian withdrawal was disciplined and well executed. Napoleon had his victory. But his army was also so shattered by fatigue and heavy losses, it was unable to launch any effective pursuit.
Wow. It's obvious that you were not at Wagram. Napoleon to a minister who mocked the Austrians. Yeah. I mean, even though the Austrians, lost in this, they held pretty strong. I mean, under torrential pressure from all sides. And you have to wonder whether or not the other Archduke John, if he had shown up like they were expecting with that 13,000 reinforcements, whether or not that would have changed the outcome of this battle too. Would it have been a double loss for Napoleon? Or when Napoleon was still won, obviously you can't go back in time. It's just something to think about. And it's something I think about is the what ifs of it all, Obviously, history is it is what it is, and it happened, and they didn't show up, and Napoleon won, and of course, now here we are.
The Battle of Wagram was a brutal slugging match, the biggest and bloodiest battle yet seen in European history. French victory came at unprecedented cost. An estimated 37,500 casualties.
Wow.
Against 41,500 Austrian. 4 days later, French troops caught up with the retreating Austrians at Znaim. As the fighting escalated, Charles knew he could not withstand the French a second time, and asked for a ceasefire. But he had not consulted his older brother, Emperor Francis, who was furious when he heard the news, not least because long-awaited British support was finally on the way. 3 weeks after the Battle of Znaim, the largest amphibious force Britain had ever assembled, 35 ships of the line and 39,000 troops, landed at Walcheren Island on the Scheldt estuary. Its aim was to destroy French shipping and naval stores. But following the successful bombardment and capture of Vlissingen, British commanders let the initiative slip from their grasp. Their force was bottled up by French troops on the marshy Dutch coast, where it was decimated by fever and dysentery. About 4,000 died. Many more became permanent invalids. The survivors were evacuated back to England in December.
That's a very interesting tactic. I mean, obviously, we know the British have an amazing navy, but this is the first time, other than landing a little bit of troops in Portugal, that they've fought like on land, right? They don't really do that often. So to land here, kind of, what was the reasoning? Is it just because it's easy to land there? I know they wanted to take that city or destroy French shipping, but it seems like they could pretty much land wherever they wanted to, right? I mean, they have command of the sea. That really sucks about dysentery. I mean, obviously, anytime you're in a swampy area, you have mosquitoes, you have just all sorts of germs and stuff in the water. I mean, and of course, at that time, they didn't have modern medicine like in the way that we do now.
Emperor Francis, informed of the British debacle and persuaded by his generals that Austria couldn't fight on, made peace with Napoleon.
Hmm.
In October, Austria signed the Treaty of Schönbrunn, giving up territory to the French Empire, Bavaria, Saxony, the Duchy of Warsaw, and Russia.
Okay.
In total, the Austrian Empire was stripped of 3.5 million subjects, forced to pay an indemnity, limit its army to 150,000 men, and join Napoleon's continental system, which meant ending all trade with British ships and merchants.
Wow.
Archduke Charles, meanwhile, one of Napoleon's more skilled opponents, had fallen out so bitterly with his brother, Emperor Francis, that he never held active command again.
Really?
Napoleon had won another crushing victory, but there were worrying signs for the French emperor. His enemies were learning, while he would increasingly have to rely on young conscripts to fill the gaps left by veterans killed or wounded on campaign. Few could have guessed in 1809, but Napoleon had just fought his last victorious campaign.
Really?
You can now support.
So he doesn't win again? Bit of a spoiler, I guess, but that was an interesting battle. Kind of for twofold. One, the dynamic between the Austrian leadership and the Emperor, Archduke Charles, seems very strange that the Archduke would be relieved of command when, or it wouldn't hold high command again when he was basically the only one who seemed to do anything. All these videos you watched, none of the leaders of the Austrians, I mean, very few of them, have ever had any success whatsoever. They've all been pretty much mauled and scattered. So it's very strange to have the guy who seems to be doing the best not be in command again. Secondly, the British becoming more active is interesting, like I was talking about, because they control the sea, yet we haven't really seen them, other than blockading like French ports, do much with that. Now, I'm sure there's been some battles that epic history is not going over, or maybe some skirmishes or whatever, but they don't seem to be much interested in like going further beyond just controlling the ocean. And maybe that's obviously, maybe that's normal because they don't really need to necessarily. But I kind of feel like if you want to defeat Napoleon, you kind of have to put all your chips on the table. But now Austria's got a peace treaty, so I'm not really sure who's going to be fighting Napoleon. I guess we'll keep finding out in future episodes. If you guys want to add any commentary, please do. Thank you to all the subscribers, anybody who subscribes. If you have any more content you want me to react to that's not Napoleon related, just keep putting that in the comments too. I'm trying to finish the Napoleon series, and then I will do like the Marshals, but I also kind of want to pivot away from Napoleon as well eventually. But I'll please keep finishing this stuff. All right, guys. This is it. On to the next one. Peace. Thank you.